Vitamin D is actually more like a hormone than a vitamin. Our skin makes it from sunlight, then it's activated in kidneys to act on distant organs. Vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin having basic biochemical structure as that of a cholesterol. So two chemical forms are present. One is ergocalciferol, that is D2, and other is cholecalciferol. Other name is D3. So D2, that is ergocalciferol, is manufactured by UV light on ergosterol present in fungi, while cholecalciferol D3 is used for therapeutic purposes. These both are provitamins from which active form of vitamin D is synthesized, and these both are used in vitamin pills and enrichment of food with vitamin D. So production of vitamin D in the skin is directly proportional to exposure to sunlight. The pigment melanin, which acts as a sunscreen, adversely affects the synthesis of cholecalciferol. So vitamin D synthesis starts in the skin. The skin contains 7-dehydrocholesterol, which is a cholesterol derivative. So when UVB rays from sunlight strikes the skin, the 7-dehydrocholesterol is converted into pre-vitamin, that is D3, which spontaneously changes into vitamin D3. Other name is cholecalciferol. So vitamin D produced in the skin is still inactive. So, a specific transport protein called vitamin D binding protein (DBP) binds cholecalciferol and moves it from the skin or intestine to liver, where it gets hydroxylated at 25th position to form 25-hydroxycholecalciferol. The liver enzyme which catalyzes this reaction is 25-hydroxylase, which is a microsomal monoenzyme, cytochrome P450. So 25-hydroxycholecalciferol is a major storage form of vitamin D. Half-life of 25-hydroxycholecalciferol in circulation is 2 to 3 weeks. It is then transported to kidneys by vitamin D binding protein. Other name of 25-hydroxycholecalciferol, which is produced in liver, is known as calcidiol. Next is activation of vitamin D in kidney. So 25-hydroxycholecalciferol is further hydroxylated at first position to form 125-dihydroxycholecalciferol, which is most potent form of vitamin D. So 125-dihydroxycholecalciferol contain 3 hydroxyl group, one at the first position, then third position and 25th position, and also called calcitriol, enzyme which catalyzes the reaction to form 125-dihydroxycholecalciferol is 1-alpha-hydroxylase, which mostly occurs in kidney, bone and placenta. So it is mitochondrial monoenzyme. So half-life of 125-dihydroxycholecalciferol is about 4 to 6 hours. Ergocalciferol obtained through diet also undergo similar hydroxylation reaction as cholecalciferol to form 125-dihydroxycholecalciferol, which is also biologically active. So next is the regulation part. So you may question, who tells the kidney to make active vitamin D? So answer is parathyroid hormone. So when blood calcium decreases, parathyroid hormone increases. So parathyroid hormone stimulates the kidney enzyme 1-alpha-hydroxylase. Production of 125-dihydroxycholecalciferol or calcitriol is regulated by its own concentration and by plasma calcium and phosphate levels, which controls the hydroxylation reaction at position 1. So unlike the effect of hypocalcemia, which is indirect, so low plasma phosphate directly increases the activity of 1-alpha-hydroxylase. So calcitriol regulates its own production by the feedback regulation. So increased level of calcitriol inhibits renal 1-alpha hydroxylase and stimulates 24-hydroxylase, resulting in formation of 24,25 dihydroxycholecalciferol, which is biologically inactive. So after activation, calcitriol enters the bloodstream like every endocrine hormone. It travels through the blood to distant target organs. So active form, that is calcitriol, since it is fat soluble, it easily crosses the cell membrane. So inside the cell, calcitriol binds to the vitamin D receptor, VDR. Think of VDR as lock and calcitriol as the key. So next is RXR. What is RXR? It is retinoid X receptors. So after calcitriol binds to VDR, VDR joins with RXR, that is retinoid X receptor, to form VDR RXR heterodimer. So this step is essential for vitamin D to exert its effect. Next is the VDR RXR complex moves into the nucleus. So in the nucleus, it binds to specific DNA sequence called vitamin D response element, VDRE. So this activates or suppresses the activity of RNA polymerase 2. So as a result, specific proteins are synthesized. Examples like calbidin, calcium transport proteins, so proteins involved in bone mineralization. So major function of vitamin D is to increase calcium absorption. So it increases through calcium channels, calbindin, calcium pumps. So as a result, more calcium enters into the bloodstream. So how it is done? So in the first step, calcium enters the intestinal cells through the calcium channels present on the intestinal epithelium. Then calcium binds to calbindin. Calbindin is a calcium binding protein. So its job is to carry calcium safely across the cell. Think of it as a carrier protein. Then calcium moves to the opposite side of the cell. Calbindin transport calcium towards the blood side. Now calcium enters the bloodstream with the help of calcium pumps, mainly calcium ATPase pump. Transport calcium into the blood. So vitamin D increase all three channels, carrier proteins and pumps. So what happens in figure A in vitamin D deficiency? So there is less vitamin D receptor activation, less calcium channels, less calbindin, less calcium pumps. As a result, less calcium enters the cell, less calcium is transported across the cell, and less calcium reaches the blood. So therefore, there is decreased calcium absorption from the intestine, which causes decrease in serum calcium, which causes increase in parathyroid hormone, and it leads to secondary hyperparathyroidism. So then parathyroid hormone tries to maintain serum calcium by increasing bone resorption, increasing renal calcium reabsorption, and this leads to bone pain, osteomalacia, muscle weakness, and increased risk of fracture. So now look at the figure B. So in this, it's a vitamin D sufficiency. So there are more of calcium channels, more of calbinding, more of calcium pumps. So more calcium enters the intestinal cell, more calcium is transported. It leads to more calcium in the bloodstream, and hence calcium levels are maintained, bones are properly mineralized, muscle function remains normal. So next are the biochemical functions. So vitamin D acts mainly on 4 organs, that is intestine, bone, kidney and parathyroid gland, and we will discuss one by one. So vitamin D plays vital role in homeostasis of calcium and phosphorus. So in active form, calcitriol regulates the plasma level of calcium and phosphorus by acting on its target organs, the intestine, bone and kidneys. So first is the action of calcitriol on intestine. Calcitriol promotes intestinal absorption of calcium and phosphorus. Next is action of calcitriol on bone. So calcitriol acts in two types of bone cells, osteoblast and osteoclast, which are responsible for bone formation and resorption respectively. So calcitriol stimulates calcium uptake in osteoblast, depositing it as calcium phosphate. Hydroxyapatite crystals. So vitamin D enhances bone metabolism. Further, calcitriol and parathyroid hormone act synergistically to promote bone resorption, that is demineralization, by stimulating osteoclast activity. So basically, role of calcitriol is number 1, elevation of plasma calcium and phosphorus concentration. Second is mineralization of newly formed bone matrix. Next is action of calcitriol on kidneys. So calcitriol conserves calcium and phosphorus by minimizing their excretion through the kidneys by stimulating their reabsorption in distal convoluted tubule. So calcitriol acts in cooperation with parathyroid hormone. Next is action of parathyroid gland. So calcitriol also act directly on parathyroid to inhibit the synthesis and secretion of parathyroid hormone. So next are dietary sources of vitamin D. So dietary sources, we have fatty fish, which includes salmon, tuna. These are the rich natural sources. Then egg yolk contains small amount of vitamin D. Mushrooms exposed to UV light contain vitamin D2. So cod liver oil is one of the richer sources. Other sources are fortified foods like milk, cereals, yogurt, and orange juice are commonly supplemented with vitamin D. So next point is breast milk contain only relatively small amount of vitamin D, and infants are at risk of developing vitamin D deficiency, particularly premature infants. Why? Because the vitamin is transported across the placenta mainly in last trimester of pregnancy. So pharmaceutical form of vitamin D is usually made by action of UV light on ergosterol. So diet alone is usually not sufficient to maintain normal vitamin D levels. Around 80 to 90% of vitamin D is synthesized in the skin when it is exposed to sunlight. So sunlight is the major source of vitamin D. Next is RDA. So RDA in India is 200 international units, while in growing children, pregnancy and lactation it is 400 international unit. Next is the deficiency part. So deficiency is not common if sunlight is taken even for 10 minutes each day. So vitamin D deficiency is very common in India. Surprisingly, many patients have normal calcium levels but still have severe vitamin D deficiency. So first symptoms patient present with is fatigue. Patient often complain of weakness and tiredness. So patient feel exhausted even after adequate sleep. Next symptom is bone pains. So patient complain of dull aching pain. Usually it occurs in lower back, legs, hips and ribs. Next, patient finds it difficult to climb stairs, get up from the floor, difficult to lift heavy objects. Then patient complains of mood changes like irritability, low mood, poor concentration. So always remember, whenever a patient presents with generalized body pain and muscle weakness, always think of vitamin D deficiency. Vitamin D deficiency primarily causes osteomalacia in adults and rickets in children. It may contribute to osteoporosis, but osteoporosis is not the primary disease caused by vitamin D deficiency. So in vitamin D deficiency, our bodies start borrowing calcium from bones to maintain blood calcium levels. Slowly, bones become weak and painful. So vitamin D deficiency is basically seen in bedridden patients who are for the longer periods, then in strict vegetarians, chronic alcoholics, persons suffering from severe liver and kidney disease, then in case of fat malabsorption syndrome, then women who cover their entire body parda for religious reasons, Then women are also prone to vitamin D deficiency during pregnancy and lactation when requirements are increased. So if I want to explain in simple language, so less sunlight plus poor diet, it will lead to vitamin D deficiency. And vitamin D deficiency will lead to decreased calcium absorption from intestine. This will increase PTH secretion, and calcium is removed from bones, which leads to weak bones and muscle weakness. And this leads to bone pain, fatigue, fractures, and osteomalacia. So calcitriol is synthesized in body, so it is not really a vitamin. Instead, it fulfills the criteria for hormone. Following are the characteristic features of vitamin D as hormone. Number 1, so cholecalciferol is synthesized in skin by photolysis reaction involving sunlight. So cholecalciferol is considered to be a prohormone. Next is biologically active form of vitamin D, calcitriol, is produced in kidneys. Hence, it is considered a renal hormone. So next point, like all other hormones, it exerts its biochemical action on specific target organs. That is the intestine, bone, and kidney. In this way, it is produced in one organ and act on distant target organs, which is a characteristic feature of hormones. Next is calcitriol is subject to feedback regulation. And last point is mechanism of action of vitamin D is similar to steroid hormone, which binds to specific intracellular receptors in the target organs and exert their function by directly interacting with genome, causing expression of specific genes. So thank you. At the end, I would say vitamin D is a hormone rather than a vitamin.